So we are in a series called Storyteller. We are unpacking 10 of the best parables from the book of Luke. These stories that Jesus taught that were a lot more than stories. They had this rich and deep meaning. They show us who God is, they show us who we are, and they show us who we should be. And last week we took a look at the Good Samaritan, and we learned that anyone in need is our neighbor, and that how we treat our neighbor says a lot about who we are, and it says a lot about the condition of our hearts. And today we're going to shift gears. Today we're going to go to a little bit of a lesser known parable. We're going to talk about the rich fool. We're going to talk about the rich fool. Now, one of the fastest growing industries in the United States over the last several years, you know what it is? The storage unit business. Now, at some point in human history, people decided our homes weren't big enough, and so we invented storage units. Now, to be fair, a good amount of people, a high percentage of people who rent storage units also live in apartments, and they don't have a basement and a garage and a shed, and I have all three of those things, and they all have way too much stuff in it. So if you rent a storage unit, or if you own a storage unit business, I'm not mad at you, but there was a time not that long ago where all of this would have seemed kind of crazy. Like, as a kid, I did not know anyone that had a storage unit. I just didn't. Like, it wasn't a thing. I don't know, maybe they just didn't have those in Perry where I was, but I just didn't know that. And now they're popping up everywhere, right? They are everywhere. There's one right next door here to the church. There's several that I pass on my commute that were not there when I started working here at Northgate. There's over 52,000 storage unit facilities in the country. They cover about 2.1 billion square feet of space. There's more self-storage facilities in the U.S. than Starbucks, McDonald's, and Subways combined. About 1/3 of Americans have a storage unit at an average cost of $125 a month. We pay money to store things we might need someday, right? We might use it. Half of it is stuff that we forgot we even owned. Well, Jesus, he tells a story about a man, and he looked at his full barns, and he thinks, the problem is not my heart, the problem is my storage capacity. But it turns out this guy was not running out of space, he was running out of time. Now, here is kind of the overarching theme when the Bible talks about our money and our possessions and our things. What the main point today is kind of the whole point of what the Bible teaches us about money, that the blessing of having money is in how we can use it for God's good purposes. Right? It can be a blessing. And money is such a crucial area for us to figure out. If we're going to be genuine Christ followers, if we're really going to take this seriously, we have to get this area straight because it has the ability to be a huge blessing. It can also be an area of strife and conflict and stress. It can be something that brings us closer to God, or it can be something that pushes us away from God. Pastor Rich Velotis, he put it this way: if a person gets his attitude toward money straight, it will help straighten out almost every other area in his life. Right? This is, for many of us, myself included, this is a linchpin issue in our lives. If we can get and keep our heart right around money, if we can find a way to avoid the greed that is so prevalent around us, if we can stay humble and disciplined and God-centered in this area of our lives, then we can do it in any area of our lives. And so today's passage, it's about a guy who makes a flawless financial plan. He saves, he plans, he expands, he makes a great plan to retire early, and then he dies before he can enjoy it. I mean, if this guy wrote a book, a lot of us would read it. If he was on a podcast, we'd download it and listen to it. But Jesus calls him a fool. He calls him a fool not because he was successful, but because he failed to consider one crucial question. Now, all this happens while Jesus is teaching. And in Luke 12, verses 4-11, Jesus is teaching. It says he's teaching to thousands of people. He's got a huge crowd, and he's teaching about some really important stuff. He's telling them how to learn to watch for false teachers, and learning to fear God, and learning how to avoid hell, learning what it really means to follow him. I mean, he is talking about some crucial, mission-critical stuff. And in the middle of that, one guy puts his hand up, and it doesn't say it, but I know he's one of these guys. You know, remember those kids from school? They're probably still there. Their hands up so much they got to prop it up, and he's like, excuse me, teacher, Jesus, right? And you're not going to believe why he interrupts Jesus. Luke 12:13, someone in the crowd said to him, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." Now, first, anyone in here with a kid, right? You're like, no, I hate this, right? I hate this. I hate when the kid goes, Dad, tell Kinsley to give me, I'm already out, right? I'm already out. I'm not going to tell Kinsley to do that, right? I'm tell you to figure out your stuff. Don't come to me and be like, tell them to give me half of the leftover pizza. Like, no, you figure this out, right? But that's what this guy's doing. And Jesus, he's got to be thinking, really? Man, are you listening? Are you listening to what I'm saying? These are crucial topics I'm addressing now. And this is what you're going to ask me. Bryce Harper would say, it's a clown question, bro, right? Now, DL might be the only one in here that gets that. And I said it just for you, man. But Jesus, he doesn't do what this man asks of him. And maybe it's just the man here that Jesus says, or it's me projecting. Jesus seems a little bit annoyed in the response in the next two verses. Jesus replied, man, see, if you read it like that, it really sounds like it, right? Man, who appointed me a judge or an arbiter between you? Then he said to them, he turns to everyone else, he says, watch out. Be on your guard against all kinds of greed. Life does not consist in an abundance of possessions. He doesn't tell the guy's brother to divide the inheritance as he requested. What he does is he realizes this guy has just revealed to the whole crowd way too much about his priorities in life. And he uses it to give the crowd this important warning. He says, watch out. Be on guard against all kinds of greed in its many different forms. And why do we need to be on guard against that? That's the key part. He said, because your life does not consist in the abundance of your possessions. Life isn't just about what you own. And even more, it's not just about owning more. Now, I've preached this several times. I hope people that have been at Northgate for a while, you know this, right? Hopefully a bunch of you do. But money is not the root of all evil. That's not what the scripture says. Because we can use what we have for God's purposes. But scripture does say that the love of money is the root of all evil. And so Jesus says we need to be on guard for that. We need to watch for that. So just to be clear about what Jesus and the Bible say about money and possessions and wealth, before we get deep into this parable, having wealth is not a sin. Worshiping wealth is. That's what we need to be on guard for. It's not sinful to have money and things. It is sinful for your money and your things to have you. Some of the wealthiest people that I know, okay, that's enough. Some of the wealthiest people that I know have also been some of the most open, generous, giving people, right? They've been blessed and they know it and they want to be a blessing to others. And that is not a sin. God can use those people greatly. But it's really easy to fall in love with our money and our stuff, even when we don't have as much money and stuff as other people. And we can look and say, wow, look how much they have. Probably they're the sinful ones. And I have half as much, but I'm deeply in love with the things I have. That's the problem. And it's easy to say, well, I'm not happy with the money and the stuff that I have right now, but if I had more money and if I had more stuff, then I'd finally be happy. That logic does not work, right? That logic doesn't work. We have to ask ourselves, if the money and the things that we have now are not making us happy, why would more money and more things make us more happy? Let me give you a spoiler. Let me save you the time. It won't. They won't. And those things, that kind of greed is what we need to be on guard for. And that's what Jesus wanted to illustrate with this parable here. So back in verses 16 and 17, and he told them this parable. The ground of a certain rich man yielded an abundant harvest. He thought to himself, what shall I do? I have no place to store my crops. Now this man, let's call him Rich. That's an easy one. Rich, he's blessed with some fertile ground. Now it's probably safe for us to assume he's also adding hard work to that ground. Even the best ground doesn't produce very much on its own. So he's got good ground. He's working hard. And because of that, he's financially successful. In fact, he's so successful that he's having trouble managing all of his resources. To quote one of the preeminent philosophers from the late 1900s, the notorious B.I.G., it's like the more money we come across, the more problems we see, right? That's what Rich is dealing with. He's got more money and he's got more problems. That's where Rich is. But he's got an idea. He has an idea in the next two verses. And he said, this is what I'll do. I will tear down my barns and build bigger ones, and there I will store my surplus grain. And I'll say to myself, you have plenty of grain laid up for many years. Take life easy, eat, drink, and be merry. He makes a plan. With all of his wealth and his resources, he can now live his life just confidently. He's got it planned out. He can do that. If he tears down his barns and he builds bigger barns, he'll be able to manage his wealth better. And if he can manage his wealth better, he can enjoy his life more. Now keep listening, pay close attention, because if you don't, it might sound like I'm going to tell you that being financially sound by having a wise financial plan is not biblical. That's not the problem. Right? Amy and I have a financial planner. We invest heavily in our retirement accounts. I'm not trying to tell you that the only way to be biblical with your finances is to save nothing and to plan nothing. Mark Logan might actually try to fight me in the parking lot if I told you that. Right? Rich's problem was not planning and saving. His problem was arrogance and assumption. And that's what we see. Go on to verse 20. But God said to him, "You fool. This very night your life will be demanded from you. Then who will get what you have prepared for yourself?" Suddenly, in a moment, all his planning, it just comes crashing down. He could make business plans. He could make financial plans. He could make life plans, but he could not control the time that he would die. And in the blink of an eye, all his accomplishments, all of his plans would be for nothing. And so he was a fool, not because he was rich, but because he lived his life in a way that showed he had no awareness of, and he had no preparation for what would come after this life. He says, "This very night your life will be demanded of you." This man, he owed everything that he had to God, all of his wealth, all of his possessions, and he either did not know that or he could not see it. Because for him, everything is my. If you look back at what he says, my crops, my barns, my surplus grains, everything was about him. And nothing was about God. Nothing was God's. And that's why everyone else, we would look at this man in the parable and you'd say he's incredibly successful, but God looks at him and he calls him a fool. Eternity proved that he was a fool. And his story shows us it's not only sinful to put our money and possessions in a more elevated position than they should be, it's also foolish. It's stupid. Verse 21, Jesus drops his normal hammer closing line here to the parable. He says, "This is how it will be with whoever stores up things for themselves, but is not rich toward God." His problem was not that he stored up things here on earth. It was that he was not rich towards God. Because again, having wealth is not a sin. Worshiping wealth is. And so we have to ask ourselves, how can we be rich toward God? What does that look like? It looks like tithing. It looks like giving to those in need, by using our money to help those in need, like we saw the Good Samaritan do last week, by trusting Jesus for everything that we need, by trusting Jesus with the things that we have, by not hoarding more for ourselves than we could ever reasonably need, and by not making becoming rich our goal, not making that our ultimate desire. In 1 Timothy chapter 6, Paul, he paints a tough picture of people who have being rich as the target, right? Again, not being rich, but having rich as our target. He says those who want to get rich fall into temptation and a trap and into many foolish and harmful desires that plunge people into ruin and destruction. It's not a great endorsement for having accumulating wealth as your heart's desire. John Wesley, who's the father of Methodism, he said you should earn as much as you can, you should save as much as you can, and you should give as much as you can. So I just want to, in our remaining time, pull 6 money traps out of this parable, 6 things that we see that are problems with money, things that can sneak up on us, things we need to be on guard against, like Jesus said. And here's the first one. Money can make us arrogant. And I'll say to myself, you have plenty of grain laid up for many years. Take life easy, eat, drink, and be merry. The man in the parable, he thinks he's got this all figured out. I mean, obviously, everything's going to go according to his plan. He's kind of that kind of guy. And we need to learn from that. We need to learn about that. Don't ever get to the point where you think, I've got this. I've got everything that I need, or even more, I am everything that I need. Those are dangerous waters to swim in. The earth is the Lord's and everything in it. It's all his. And so what you and I have came from him. Did you work hard? Yeah, you probably did. Have you earned what you have? Most likely, I sure hope you have. But the earth is the Lord's and everything in it. You have it because he has entrusted it to you. And we cannot lose that perspective, right? We can't let arrogance take that perspective away from us. Next money trap is that money can become our primary source of hope. This very night, your life will be demanded from you. Then who will get what you have prepared for yourself? Having money can make us feel secure when we're not. When our money makes us arrogant, we put not only our hope in ourselves, but also in the money. And we start to look at what we have, and we start to look at what else we can earn as our source of hope. There's a guy named Watchman Nee, a 20th century Christian or Chinese Christian leader, author, and church planner. And he has this great imagery. He talks about a bucket and a fountain. And when I read this, I've never viewed it the same way, right? Because what we have, our possessions, our wealth, our stuff is a bucket. And the thing is, we carry around this bucket, right? And God gave it to us and he entrusted, and we fall in love with this bucket, right? We're like, look at this. This is my Roth IRA, right? This is my 401k. This is my house. We paid it off, right? This is my car. Look at, I got all this stuff. And we walk around with our bucket, very proud of it, right? And like, this is it. This is my bucket. And what we fail to realize with that, what we lose sight of with that, is that right over there, there's a fountain. And God is that fountain. And we could empty this bucket out and fill the bucket up 100 more times, 1,000 more times from the fountain. And we become so enamored with the contents of the bucket that we forget to realize God could empty it out and fill it up without stop. And so we have to keep our eyes focused on the source much more than on the substance. We need to be much more focused on that fountain than on the contents of the bucket. Now, I want you to have a good, well-paying, fulfilling job. I want you to have a good emergency fund and a fully funded Roth IRA and 401k, but I also don't ever want any of us to forget that those things are merely the contents of the bucket. God's the fountain. God is the source of what we have. He's the source of what we will have. And even more than that, he is the source of our hope. Because if your retirement accounts are the source of your hope, you ride a roller coaster every day, right? You log on your phone or your computer, you look at the newspaper, you got to see, is it red? Is it green? Is it up? Is it down? What's going on? What are they saying? What are the Asian markets doing, right? You're putting all of your hope in there. Next, money can make us blind. But God said to him, "You fool." Money can make us short-sighted. It can become so captivating. We can become so captivated with the things that we own, with the things that we have, and we lose sight of the fact that life is about so much more. Thomas Edison, he once offered George Washington Carver the opportunity to come work with him at Edison Laboratories in Menlo Park, New Jersey. And he offered him a salary of $100,000, which in current money is about $4 million. Carver declined the offer. He declined a lot of offers like this. And he was really blown away that anybody expected him to get such rewards, right? To claim those rewards for the gifts that God has given him. And someone challenged him once. So they challenged him and said, "But listen, if you had all that money, you could help your people." And Carver replied, "If I had all that money, I might forget my people." Because money can make us blind. Don't let the money that you have, the things that you have, make you a fool. We need to be on guard for that. Next one, pursuing money can become an addictive cycle where we believe that more is always better. Then he said, "This is what I'll do. I'll tear down my barns and build bigger ones, and there I will store my surplus grain." We got to be on watch for this, Northgate. We have to be on guard for it. It's been said that wealth is like seawater, and the more we drink, the thirstier we become, and it is a slippery slope that many have fallen down. In Ecclesiastes 5:10, Solomon warns us, "Whoever loves money never has enough, and whoever loves wealth is never satisfied with their income." But more money is not always better. Now, I don't want to be tone deaf here, so let's be honest. Some of you could honestly use more money right now. I get it, right? If you can't pay your utilities, you're thinking, actually a little bit more money would go a long way. It'd be really helpful. But I'm talking about when we have enough and we decide it's still not enough. Because if we do that, that means it will never be enough. You will never get to that spot. And again, there's nothing wrong with savings. Sometimes people try to live recklessly and they call it faith. Don't do that. That's not what I'm encouraging you to do. But in the parable, Rich never looked at who else he could help with his wealth. He never asked what he could do, right? What he could do for other people. He simply thought, well, more is better. More must be better. And that became his goal. And more is not always better. Some of you have wrestled with that with job offers, right? There are churches that could offer to pay me twice as much as Northgate, and I would not go, right? I would not go. No, I will not name them here. But calling and culture matters so much more to me at this stage of my life, right? Some of you have had the same thing with job offers. You said, this is more money, but at what cost? At what cost to my family and my schedule and my mental health and all of that? Because more isn't always better, right? It's not automatically bad, but it's not always better. So we can't get into that addictive cycle that says, I've got to get more. And when I get more, I got to get even more after that. Because if you do, you will spend the rest of your life chasing that. And someday you'll die and you'll have chased after this thing that can never be caught. Next, money can become what we attach our self-image to. This is how it will be with whoever stores up things for themselves, but is not rich toward God. The kind of person that you are, the relationship that you have with God, the relationship that you have with the people you love matters more than your annual salary. Don't attach your self-image or your self-worth to your bottom line or to your net worth, because this very night, God could demand your life from you. And then what would you have to show for it all? And the final trap that we see in this passage here is that money can create the illusion that those who are richer are smarter. Now, it's said at the very beginning, the ground of a certain man yielded an abundant harvest. Where does Jesus give the credit? Right? He gives the credit to the ground. Now, we know the ground doesn't do much on its own. We have to do the work, but that's what yields the harvest. Wealth is not always a sign that God has blessed someone. And poverty is not always a sign that God has not blessed someone. Life is about a lot more than just that. And if you don't believe me, right, if you push back on that, we got to get you to some other parts of the world, because here in particular, I think it can be easy to say, well, obviously, God has blessed this person that has the new car and the big house and the nice boat. God's blessed them much more than he's blessed someone who's living without those things. But man, I've got some friends in Rwanda that would argue otherwise, right? Those of us who've had the privilege to be in Rwanda, or if you've traveled to some other parts of the country, you've seen something firsthand that blows this mentality out of the water. We sat in houses, and some of those houses were smaller than our walk-in closet. We were not in a house in Rwanda that was bigger than any of my children's rooms, the entire house. But they live and they act as if they're the most blessed people in the world. Right? Because they had food and water today. They live as if there's nothing that they could possibly want, because they have the love of God and they have people that they love around them. And as simple as it may be, they have a roof over their heads. And so they'll actually sit there in their tiny dirt floor house and they'll pray that God blesses you. They'll pray that God blesses the people of Northgate, that God blesses the families that sponsor them. I remember sitting there and having them ask, tell us about our sponsors, right? Tell us about Rick and Jen Dunn. And we'd tell them about the Dunns and tell them about all the great things they do. And they would pray and they'd be like, God, we pray that you will bless them. And there's something in me sitting in that spot that says, man, we've got everything. How could you pray that God blesses us? We should be praying God blesses you, but I assure you, they don't see it that way. Then, as Jesus often does with these parables, he kind of goes to his disciples at the end. He gives them a post-game talk. He gives them a little debriefing just for them in Luke 12, 22 to 25. Then Jesus said to his disciples, therefore, I tell you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat, or about your body, what you will wear. For life is more than food, and the body is more than clothes. Consider the ravens. The ravens didn't even make the play. We're not talking about football. They do not sow or reap. They have no storeroom or barn, yet God feeds them. And how much more valuable you are than birds. Who of you by worrying can add a single hour to your life? Now, if you're reading this in order, you might be thinking, wait, did Jesus just make a jump from greed to worry? We were talking about greed and now we jumped to worry. And I was reading about that, and author David Guzik, he wisely said, greed and worry are closely connected. Greed can never have enough. Worry is afraid it will never be enough. What they share in common is that neither has their eyes on Jesus. Everything we have comes from God and belongs to God. That's why money in itself is not evil. Having possessions is not inherently bad. Jesus does not condemn the rich man for having a good year. It doesn't even condemn him for being rich. Instead, Jesus says it's his arrogant, short-sighted approach, right? That's what he uses to make the point that our hope and our security is not to be found in our bank account or our possessions, but in our relationship with God through Jesus, in the condition of our heart, in the generosity and the open-handedness that we have, and then in the richness of the relationships that we have with people around us. So what do we need to do, right? What's a practical approach that we need to have in our lives? Let's say it's this, that we have to shift our focus from self-centered security to God-centered living. That's where his mistake was. It was all in self-centered security. We have to do this. Do a regular check-in. Do it with yourself. If you're married, do this with your spouse. If you're not, have someone that loves you, that you can be honest with, and that will be honest enough, that loves you enough to tell you the truth. Where are you living on this scale right now between self-centered security and God-centered living? And this isn't a one-time check the box kind of thing. This wasn't like, oh, in 2008, I decided. No, you're going to have to do this over and over again, right? You're going to have to keep checking in because it's going to keep pulling you back. And that kind of flow of greed and possessions, it will pull you back in. We have to watch out for it. For me, one of the times that I do that is the first of every month when I send our tithe check in from the bank, right? Of everything that we're going to make in the month ahead. You don't have to tithe in the same way. This is what we do. But on February 1st, I'm sending the tithe check for everything that we're planning to make in February. And for me, the underlying question every time is, John, in February, are you going to trust the bucket? Or are you going to trust the fountain? Are you going to put your hope in those things, or you're going to continue to trust the God who supplied them all and can supply so much more? And time again, I have to ask myself, and you have to ask yourself, am I living in a way that says I believe that my life consists in an abundance of possessions? Or am I being on guard for all kinds of greed? Is my focus self-centered security or God-centered living? Let's pray. God, I thank you for the words and the directness of Jesus, God. God, I thank you. There's some comfort, for me at least, that people struggled with these same things thousands of years ago to the point that Jesus said, I got to make this point to these people that are listening to me. So God, I pray, Lord, that we would take the words and the wisdom of Jesus and we would apply them to our lives. God, I pray that we would genuinely wrestle with that question. Have we put too much hope in ourselves and in our wealth and our possessions? Or are we still trusting you? God, I pray that we would know and recognize and live in a way that shows we know everything we have comes from you, everything belongs to you, and everything can be used for your purposes when our hearts and our minds and our spirits and our souls are submitted to you. And so, God, that's our desire. God, I think of in your word, Lord, where it says, give me enough so that I'm not so poor I have to steal to eat, but don't give me so much that I forget who God is. And Lord, I believe and pray that that's where we want to be. And so God, help us to do that. Help us to honor you in this area of our lives, God, because I believe if we can do it here, we can do it pretty much anywhere. We love